Hello viewers. In this session on verbal ability today, we will discuss a question type that is a very important question across all exams. We call this the paragraph completion question or a PCQ. Now, because the word completion has already been mentioned before you, you would understand that it involves a paragraph which has to be completed. So, in such kind of questions, there is a paragraph which is given to you, and you as a test taker have to look among the options, read each option individually and decide which sentence or which conclusion can complete the idea that has been presented on and forwarded in the paragraph. Though it sounds a little tough, it's not as tough if you practice on it a lot. Reading skills are very important because when a person reads a lot, he or she is able to grasp or grab the idea flow, and this question type essentially tests any candidate's understanding of idea flow and verbal reasoning. So, keeping this in mind, you need to assess or look at a paragraph completion question. Now, because it says it's a paragraph completion question, the sentence that's important is the conclusion. Because it's a paragraph completion question, you need to keep in mind that you have to look through the sentences to find the one that concludes. So, what is a conclusion? A conclusion is that sentence or that idea which plugs in the idea flow or completes the idea flow and does not extend it forward, or it does not bring it any new line of thought. So, we have to be mindful of certain words and phrases in all the other options which cannot be our correct option, and these words or phrases could be words like besides, in addition to, apart from, moreover. So, we understand that these are words or phrases which add to an already existing idea, and we cannot choose them because we are looking for a sentence which stops or plugs the gap, finishes the idea and concludes it. Now, when you look at any paragraph or this kind of a question, what you have to keep in mind is that you need to of course read the paragraph first. While reading, you will instantly realize what the theme of the passage is, because this is a very small. So, the theme or the topic of the paragraph is introduced in the very first sentence. The one sentence that precedes the blank, or that part, the last sentence where there is a blank, the one that precedes it is of utmost importance also, and you have to look for that sentence which in which there is a direct link between the preceding sentence and the one that you are going to choose as your correct answer. So, with these inputs in mind, we will have a few examples that you can work out and I will make you understand them, so that you have better grasp on these and you are successful while attempting them in the exam. So, viewers, there are a few questions which will keep popping up on your screen and you can read through them. I will read them out for you and then we will understand how to work them out. The first question is, although secularism and secularization are closely related, they nevertheless differ because they do not necessarily offer the same answer to the question of the role of religion in society. Secularism argues generally for a sphere of knowledge, values and action that is independent of religious authority, but it does not necessarily exclude religion from having any authority over political and social affairs. Fine. So, we now understand what the topic of the sentence of the paragraph is, and we need to look after I read out the choices to you, look for that sentence which will complete the paragraph, the idea that is put forth in the paragraph, and put an end to it. The first option is, because the concept of the secular is normally conceived as standing in opposition to religion, many people may not realize that it originally developed within a religious context. The second one says, secularism is one of the most important movements of the modern West. The third one says, secularization, however, is a process which does not involve such an exclusion. Despite its importance, says the fourth one, there isn't always a great deal of agreement on just what secularism really is. And the fifth one and the last one says, many countries in the world are secular. Okay, so we need to understand that the passage is drawing a comparison between secularism and secularization. The words are there for you to read, so you need to focus on them and understand that the difference between these two terms is under consideration. Now, look at the last sentence, that means the one which is before the blank. It says, secularism argues generally for a sphere of knowledge, values and action that is independent of religious authority, but it does not necessarily exclude religion from having any authority over political and social affairs. So, the last sentence is something that says that secularism does not exclude religion, and therefore, after reading out or looking at the choices again, you understand that the third option is the one which can fit in to complete the idea. Because it says exactly that and continues with it, and later on it plugs it also. Now, why can't we consider any other option? Look students, this question type works by the process of elimination. Before zeroing in on the right choice, you need to read each one individually, associate it with the text you have at hand, and try to eliminate it also if it is not applicable. So, the first one talks about religious origins of secularism, and therefore, it is not associated. We cannot go ahead with such a choice which takes the topic away from whatever the author or the paragraph has already discussed. Fine. Now, the second option is not relevant at all, because it says secularism is one of the most important movements of the modern world. There is no relevance of what this option says to the rest of the paragraph. So, we can eliminate it, and option 4 talks about the importance of secularism. Fifth is absolutely absurd, because it says many countries in the world are secular. It is vague, incomplete, and has no connection at all with the rest of the thought that the paragraph presents. So, we need to rule out all these options and mark 3 as the correct choice. Let us move on to the second question now. In the second paragraph, the content is such: casting our ego as the enemy in a holy war and winning that battle is an exceedingly difficult proposition, primarily because the ego proves to be a more subtle adversary. In fact, the ego will even join the battle against itself. As an enemy, it infiltrates our lives, wearing our own uniform, its soldiers indistinguishable from ours. For most of us, it comes to nothing but an increased layer of suffering as we merely fight ourselves in the name of spirituality and sink more deeply than ever into the morass of self-centeredness. Okay, so in this question, the idea is about how a person can cast one's ego aside. Read the options, I will read them out for you, and let us consider which is the best. The first one says, how does one fight a battle against such a devious and resourceful enemy? The last sentence tells us the effect of it, and this option is asking us how to fight a battle. So, there is no direct association or connection between these two thoughts, and therefore, one does not work. The second one says only the rarest of souls find a way through this conundrum. Now, in this choice, the word conundrum is of essence. Conundrum is a difficult problem, and in the entire paragraph, this particular aspect has been discussed, that casting our ego aside is a difficult thing. So, till so far, I mean, between the choices that I have read out for you, 1 and 2, 1 we have eliminated, 2 seems possible, but before I finish reading the remaining ones and categorically decide as 2 as the answer, please do not commit the mistake of marking a choice right away in the middle of the process. So, I move on to the third one. An alternative but also traditional view casts ego in an entirely different perspective, not as an enemy, but as an illusion. Now, this is again not very clear and would need to be explained further. So, we cannot have such a choice which looks vague or abstract. So, we remove it. We move on to the fourth one. Our belief in our ego or separate self is to a large extent learnt from society. Now, this is something new which has no relevance to what has been discussed or mentioned over here, and it takes us away from the line of argument, and therefore, it cannot be a suitable conclusion. We eliminate it. Move on to the fifth one. Casting our ego aside is actually easy. Now, again, this has to be explained further as to why it is easy when the rest of the paragraph is telling us that casting our ego aside is something which is very difficult and troublesome or problematic. This at this juncture, if we bring in a thought which says casting aside our ego is very easy, it definitely needs to be explained further, and therefore, it cannot be used to conclude a thought. We eliminate 5, and now we can categorically say that option 2 is the most suitable conclusion for this paragraph. I'll continue with the third paragraph. For many centuries, Africa and its people seemed mysterious and even perverse to the rest of the world. Generations of traders anchored their ships off the continent's glittering surf line. They knew and valued Africa's gold and ivory, but the continent itself is a puzzle. Where had Africans come from? Many answers were proposed, but most of them served only to deepen the darkness. At last, the Europeans resorted to an easy conclusion, and this is followed by a blank space, indicating that you need to, among the choices, fit in the most suitable one. So, the first option says, the simple-minded answers to the riddle of Africa has lasted right up to modern times. As I read, you can understand there is no direct link between the sentence which precedes the blank and the sentence that I have just read out. So, because it is not a suitable fit, there is no connection, we cannot go ahead with it. Africa has been rediscovered by the scholars. Now, the previous sentence says that the Europeans resorted to an easy conclusion. So, definitely we need a choice which tells us what that conclusion is, and not something which is tangential or which is completely new and not fitting in and not easily comprehensible. So, this, if we choose this, we need to explain further, go ahead with the thought, and therefore, we cannot choose it at the stage where the idea has to be plugged in, finished and concluded. I will move on to the third one. The third one says, Africa has not been after all a land of unrelieved savagery and chaos. Again, a distortion, because it brings in something which is not connected to the final part that is before the blank and therefore irrelevant. Option 4 says Africans, they decided, were just savages, inferior beings and had always been so. So, it is very noticeable that you focus on the pronoun they. Now, the sentence which precedes the blank mentions the word, the noun Europeans, and we have over here the pronoun they. So, the pronoun they is a substitute for the Europeans which who have been mentioned earlier, and there is a direct connection between these two. So, this seems the most suitable choice till so far. The fifth one, their conclusions were exact. Now, if they were exact, we need to know what the conclusions were, and in the absence of this particular explanation, we cannot go in for 5 because it would still leave things hanging in air. Therefore, fourth is the best option for this question. Well, here is an easier one for you. The subject was of greater interest to sailors than the patterns of the great oceans, the winds, and here the shore-based experts were of no help at all. Mariners had to find out for themselves that the seas are divided into certain zones in which the trade winds blow steadily in certain directions, and others, the doldrums, in which the air is quiet for months at a time. They also had to learn that the zones change with the seasons. So, very clearly the passage is telling us about ocean winds, zones and change of seasons that the sailors were unaware of previously. I will read out the options. The first one says, in time, collections of navigators' records were assembled into pilotage books, invaluable to the captain approaching a harbour he had never before visited. No connection, and therefore, by the process of elimination, this choice is out. Slowly, a map of the invisible winds were superimposed on the map of the coasts and islands. Now, the idea that there was something about ocean wind zones and change of seasons that sailors were unaware of, and as they gained knowledge, they formed a map from the pattern that they observed. So, till so far, 2 seems to be the most suitable and appropriate choice. Nonetheless, the stories in whole or in part always leaked out. Now, this is a new idea, unexplained and a clear misfit, and therefore, we cannot go ahead with it. By and large, however, the compass was quite accurate as a navigational aid for voyagers who ventured beyond sight of the land. Well, the previous sentence says they had to also learn that the zones change with the season, and here it says by and large, however, the compass was quite accurate. There is no connection, no association at all between the two ideas that these two sentences present, and therefore 4 is also not pertinent. The fifth one says ocean currents are generated from the forces acting upon the water like the earth's rotation, the wind, the temperature and salinity differences. Here again it does not tell us why the sentence has been presented. It seems to have appeared out of the blue without any association with the rest of the paragraph, or the line of thought or argument is not completed by putting in this choice at the conclusion stage. So, we can rule it out, and our answer for this question is option number 2. So, the final one for you here. For supporters of the impact theory, the K Cretaceous period, T Tertiary period, boundary layers contain 2 crucial clues. In 1979, scientists discovered that there were high concentrations of a rare element called tritium, which they thought could only have come from an asteroid. Right underneath the iridium was a layer of spherules, tiny balls of rock which seemed to have been condensed from rock which had been vaporized by a massive impact. The first option says, on the basis of the spherules and a range of other evidence, Dr. Alan Hildebrand of the University of Calgary deducted that the impact must have happened in the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, though I have not read out the rest of the options, the very first option seems to be the most likely choice, because there is a clear association of what has been mentioned between what has been mentioned and this option. Now, it concludes the idea therefore, and let us keep it on hold till we eliminate, and then we can categorically say that this is the most suitable option. The second one says the impact theory seemed to provide the complete answer. Now, 2 is talking about the answer, but the passage does not give any answers. So, there is no, this seems to be absurd and we cannot go ahead with it. The third one says this, they concluded, must have finished off the dinosaurs by a variety of mechanisms. So, of course, the paragraph is talking about an asteroid attack which is taken to be the reason why dinosaurs appeared, but this is not mentioned in the passage. This choice says that, but it is something which is out of scope of the paragraph, and so this cannot be it cannot be a suitable choice. The fourth one says the impact theory was beautifully simple and appealing. Now, this is clearly out of place, and because there is nothing to suggest a link between this choice and what I just read out in the paragraph. So, we remove fourth and move ahead to read on the fifth one. A catastrophic collision about 4.5 million years ago between Earth and a protoplanet created a disk of molten rock, gas and debris which consolidated to form the moon. I hope you got it. The very idea that this option mentions moon helps us understand it's a clear digression from whatever the rest of the paragraph has stated, and this cannot appear at the final stage where things need to be wound up and set free. So, fifth is wrong and the answer is 1. I hope you have understood what I was trying to tell you, and I hope you understood the mechanism, the process of these question types and how they work. Please prepare well and be well equipped in handling them. All the best.